My name is Hiram Little, and I thought the worst pain I'd ever feel was the heart attack that nearly killed me. I was wrong. Lying in a hospital bed, I waited for my daughter to come rushing through the door the way she always promised she would if anything happened to me. Instead, she never showed. And while I fought for my life, her husband posted a picture of cocktails with a caption that sliced deeper than any scalpel. Finally, a day without the drama king. That was me. The man who had paid their bills, fixed their problems, and believed love was enough. I survived the attack, but what I discovered afterward almost broke me. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more powerful stories. The first thing I heard was the beeping. A steady mechanical pulse that dragged me back from the edge of nothingness. My eyelids felt heavy as if sand had been poured over them, but I forced them open. All I saw were white ceiling tiles and harsh fluorescent lights. The smell of disinfectant mixed with something metallic told me the truth before anyone spoke. I was in a hospital. A nurse leaned over me, her ponytail tucked neatly behind her shoulders, eyes filled with cautious warmth. "Mr. Little, you're awake. You had a heart attack this afternoon. The paramedics brought you in just in time." Her words were ice water down my spine. Heart attack. I tried to sit up, but she gently pressed me back down. "Take it easy. We've called your daughter. She should be here soon." Those words, more than the diagnosis, gave me strength. Wendy. She'd be pacing the hallway by now, wringing her hands the way she always did when she worried about me. I pictured her rushing through the doors, insisting she'd stay the night by my side. That thought was a lifeline. But an hour passed. No sound of hurried footsteps, no familiar face appearing in the doorway. When the nurse returned to check the monitor, I asked, "Did you reach her?" She answered, the nurse said carefully, avoiding my eyes. She said she was busy today and couldn't come. The monitor betrayed me with a sharp spike as my heart rate rose. "Busy," I croaked. "She doesn't work Thursdays?" The nurse's voice softened with pity. "Sometimes family members react differently to emergencies. Shock can keep people away." Shock? No, that wasn't Wendy. She had told me 100 times she'd always answer if there was an emergency. Always. My chest tightened, not from the heart attack, but from something heavier. Doubt. As soon as she left, I reached for my phone. My hands shook so badly the IV tugged at my arm. I called Wendy. Ring after ring, then voicemail. "Wendy, it's Dad. I'm in the hospital, Columbus Community Room 247. Please call me." I hung up and tried again. Nothing. I typed a message, "Had heart attack. In hospital. Please call." The checkmark confirmed it was delivered. I stared at the screen, waiting for the little dots that meant she was typing back. None appeared. Minutes dragged like hours. My heart monitor beeped louder with every breath. Finally, I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened Facebook. If Wendy wasn't answering, maybe she'd posted something that explained why. What I found nearly stopped my heart a second time. A fresh post from Jasper, her husband, 2 cocktail glasses clinking on their kitchen counter. His caption read, "Finally a day without the drama king." The timestamp matched the very moment paramedics had been loading me into the ambulance. Drama king. My eyes blurred. They weren't waiting in fear for me. They were celebrating my absence. And in that moment, still tethered to machines, I realized survival was only the beginning of this story. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. That caption, "Finally a day without the drama king," burned itself into my chest, deeper than the heart attack ever could. I zoomed in my fingers, trembling, to make sure it wasn't some cruel joke aimed at someone else. but it was posted at 1:47 p.m., the exact moment the paramedics had wheeled me into the ambulance. That was no coincidence. They were talking about me. I scrolled down, searching for context, anything that could soften the blow. Instead, I found laughter. Dozens of likes, laughing emojis, even comments from neighbors I'd helped fix gutters for, or friends of Wendy who had sat at my table on holidays. They all found it funny that I wasn't there, that I was gone, maybe for good. The phone grew slick in my palm. My throat tightened until swallowing felt impossible. How many times had I paid their rent when they were behind? How many times had I driven across town to watch their cat while they vacationed, or slipped them cash for groceries when Jasper's design jobs dried up? I thought I was doing what any good father would. But apparently to them, I wasn't a lifeline. I was a punchline. My chest squeezed again, and the monitor beside me shrieked its alarm. A nurse rushed in, adjusting dials, urging me to breathe slowly. I nodded, forcing myself to calm down. But inside, I was anything but calm. When the room cleared again, I opened my photo gallery. Every memory I had of Wendy was there, her laughing in that red sweater last Christmas, the day we painted her first bedroom pink when she was 6, her college graduation, where I stood proud, despite the cost, nearly wiping out my retirement savings. I had clung to those moments as proof that family meant something deeper than money, but now each picture looked like a receipt I'd been foolish enough to keep. I called again, straight to voicemail. My voice cracked as I tried once more. "Wendy, please. I need you." But silence was all I received in return. I stared at the cocktail photo again. The little umbrellas in the drinks mocked me. They weren't grieving, they were toasting. Toasting the idea of a life without me, hovering without my drama. That's what I had become to them, an inconvenience, not a father. The weight of realization pressed down hard, all those late-night calls about emergencies, all those teary promises to pay me back, all those times she said Mom would want you to help us. They hadn't been cries for help. They had been transactions, and I had been the ATM. I set the phone down, my hand trembling so much the IV line swayed. For 68 years, I had believed love was enough to bind a family together. Now, lying in that sterile room, I learned the truth. To Wendy and Jasper, love had an expiration date, and apparently mine had already passed. The hospital room was silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. Yet inside my head, there was a roar louder than any storm. I couldn't stop replaying every sacrifice I had made for Wendy and Jasper, each one now twisted into evidence of how blind I had been. 6 months ago, Wendy called in tears about rent, said the landlord was threatening eviction. I drove straight to the bank and withdrew $1,500, no questions asked. "You're the only family I have left, Dad," she'd whispered. 2 months later, it was groceries. $800 this time, wrapped in promises of repayment that never came. And then just last week, Jasper was bragging about some big project that would change everything if only they had the cash flow to keep the lights on. I gave them $1,200 again, convincing myself that it was temporary. Temporary. That was the word they always used. But seeing that cocktail photo made me realize something chilling. Temporary had become permanent. My generosity wasn't a bridge for them to cross hard times. It was the foundation of their entire life. And while I was fighting for mine, they were celebrating a day without the burden of my existence. The nurse returned, checking the IV. "Your daughter still hasn't arrived?" she asked gently. I shook my head, too ashamed to admit what I had discovered online. She patted my arm, the kind of small kindness a stranger offers when family fails. When she left, I turned back to my phone. Maybe Wendy hadn't seen my messages. Maybe she was still in shock. I refreshed her Facebook page again. No updates. But Jasper's post had more likes now, more laughing emojis piling on. Everyone felt like another nail in the coffin of the father-daughter bond I thought was unbreakable. For years, I'd excused her behavior as stress or grief after her mother died. I told myself she leaned on me because she needed me, because deep down she still loved me. But now I saw it differently. She didn't lean on me out of love. She leaned on me because it was easy. I pressed my palm to my chest, not because of pain, but because the truth was settling there like a stone. My daughter wasn't coming. Not today, not tonight. And if I died tomorrow, I wondered how long she'd even wait before turning my house keys in the lock and claiming what she thought was hers. The monitor beeped in time with the anger building in me. For the first time in years, I let myself consider a thought I had always pushed aside. Maybe kindness had made me weak. Maybe love had made me blind. As I stared at the ceiling tiles, one realization cut through the noise with razor sharpness. If Wendy and Jasper were so eager for a future without me, perhaps it was time I gave them exactly what they wanted. But not in the way they expected. The night inside that hospital stretched on forever. Every time I closed my eyes, the same words floated back like a cruel refrain. Finally, a day without the drama king. It wasn't just a caption. It was a confession. They had said aloud what they'd probably whispered behind my back for years. I thought about Sarah, my late wife. She used to warn me gently, even on Wendy's wedding day. Be careful, she'd whispered while dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Sometimes kindness can look like weakness to the wrong people. I had brushed it off then, too eager to see our daughter start her new life, too desperate to believe she'd grow into someone who valued more than money. Now I realized Sarah had seen what I refused to. I stared at the IV line feeding medication into my veins, tethering me to life. What tether did Wendy have to me anymore? It wasn't love. It wasn't gratitude. It was access. Access to my wallet, my house, my savings, and eventually, my grave. At dawn, Teresa the nurse stepped in again. She gave me the kind of look only medical staff know how to give, professional, but touched with pity. Your daughter called the desk earlier, she said softly. She asked about visiting hours. I almost laughed, though it came out as a hollow cough. Visiting hours. After ignoring my calls and texts, after letting me dangle between life and death, she thought she could waltz in tomorrow with flowers and crocodile tears. She would smile, maybe even cry on command, while I footed the bill for another performance. But this time I would not play the fool. When Teresa left, I forced myself to sit upright. My chest ached, but it wasn't just the heart attack. It was the weight of clarity pressing down. For years, I had mistaken dependence for devotion. But love didn't look like disappearing during a medical crisis. Love didn't look like laughing at the thought of your father's death. The truth was bitter, but it steadied me. If Wendy and Jasper saw my life as a burden and my death as a payday, then I needed to change the rules of the game. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 7 a.m. In a few hours, I'd be discharged. Tomorrow, Wendy might arrive at my bedside, feigning concern, asking how I was holding up. But by then, I'd be ready. I thought about the house, the place where Sarah and I had built a life, where Wendy had taken her first steps, where every corner was soaked with memories. That house was the crown jewel of their expectations. They believed it was already theirs, just waiting for me to collapse permanently. That's when the idea struck me with the clarity of sunrise. If they wanted to treat me as though I were already dead, then maybe it was time to bury something. Not myself, but their inheritance. By the time I was discharged, I felt like a man who had lived two different lives. The first ended the moment Jasper pressed post on that photo. The second began when I decided not to die the way they expected, broken passive waiting for vultures to circle. The taxi dropped me at my house late the next morning. From the outside, everything looked the same, the blue shutters in need of a new coat of paint, the crack in the walkway I kept meaning to fix. But when I opened the door, the air carried a faint perfume that didn't belong. Wendy had been here. I set my keys on the table and scanned the living room. At first glance, nothing was missing. But years as an engineer had trained me to notice details. The stack of journals on the coffee table had shifted slightly. Behind them, where I kept an old coin collection, the space was empty. My knees nearly buckled. That collection had spanned 3 generations, pieces my grandfather once pressed into my palm with pride. Gone. I stumbled into the kitchen, opened the coffee canister on the shelf. I always kept 400 in there for emergencies. 200 remained, half taken like a tithe from a man they thought wouldn't notice. Upstairs, I found my father's watch missing from the dresser drawer. The Omega he'd worn every day of his life, the one he removed and handed to me just before he died. To anyone else, it was worth a few $100s. To me, it was priceless. Now it was gone, too. I sank onto the bed, the mattress creaking under my weight, and forced myself to breathe evenly. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't a quick grab for cash. No, it was systematic, methodical. Wendy had rifled through my files, shifted the drawers, studied what was valuable and what wasn't. She wasn't stealing. She was cataloging like an appraiser preparing for an estate sale. The thought was worse than the heart attack. While I lay unconscious, tethered to machines, my daughter wasn't praying for me. She was planning for a life after me. I pulled out my phone and snapped photos of every detail, the misplaced canister, the empty spot behind the books, the rifled desk drawers. Evidence. Not for the police, but for myself, so I could never again deny what was happening. I walked back through the house, each room whispering of Sarah and the life we'd built, but now corrupted by betrayal. Every detail was a reminder I had allowed this. By giving, always giving, I had taught Wendy that love was measured in dollars, not devotion. But as I locked the front door behind me, one truth steeled my resolve. If they wanted to treat me like I was already gone, then I would show them what being gone truly meant. Not by dying, but by living on my own terms. They thought they had planned for my funeral. What they didn't know was that I had just begun planning theirs, only it wouldn't be their bodies buried. It would be their inheritance, their illusions, and their control. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds of my bedroom, but it felt colder than winter. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm, staring at the photos I'd taken the night before. Each image told the story I had been too stubborn to face. Wendy wasn't just careless or overwhelmed. She had crossed the line into betrayal so blatant it could no longer be excused. The empty space behind the history books where my coin collection had rested for decades. The coffee canister nudged a few inches off its usual spot, half its contents gone. The dresser drawer that should have held my father's watch, but instead gaped like a wound. These weren't accidents or oversights. They were choices. Her choices. I thought back to every time she'd told me, "Dad, you dramatize things too much." It had become her favorite way to dismiss me, to make me question my own instincts. But the evidence in those photos didn't care about dramatics. It was cold fact. Still, part of me clung to a thread of denial. Maybe she had taken the money for groceries. Maybe Jasper needed the watch to pawn until his next paycheck. Maybe the coins were misplaced. But deep down, I knew better. It was too neat, too selective, too practiced. She wasn't scrambling. She was preparing. That realization planted a seed of anger that grew roots fast. I had always believed that family deserved endless patience, endless forgiveness. But where was my forgiveness when I lay unconscious in a hospital bed? Where was my patience when my name became the butt of their jokes online? I set the mug down harder than I meant to coffee, sloshing over the rim. My reflection in the dark liquid startled me. I looked tired, older than my 68 years, but behind the lines, etched by grief and stress, there was something new, steel. I realized then that my silence, my willingness to look the other way, had been their greatest weapon. If they saw me as a drama king, it was only because I had allowed them to define the narrative. What if I rewrote the script? What if I turned their assumptions against them? The first step would be quiet. Careful. I couldn't storm into Wendy's house and accuse her. That would only give her more room to twist the story, to paint me as unstable, to make her version of events the truth. No, if I wanted to win, I had to think like an engineer again. Diagnose the problem, design the solution, build it piece by piece until it was unshakable. I stood, walked to the window, and looked at the house across the street, where my neighbor Jacqueline was trimming her hedges. She had no idea that inside this home, a man was realizing his entire life had been built on illusions. But unlike Wendy and Jasper, Jacqueline's kindness was genuine. That thought gave me something rare, a flicker of hope. Hope that I still had time to reclaim what was mine. Later that day, I drove across town to Wendy's rental house. My chest still ached with every movement, but anger dulled the pain. I needed to look her in the eye to see if she could lie as easily to my face as she had through her silence. The porch steps sagged beneath my feet as I knocked. Almost instantly, the door opened, and there she was, my daughter. Wendy's face bloomed with rehearsed concern, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. "Dad, you should be resting. How are you feeling?" I searched her eyes, hunting for something real. "I called you," I said flatly. "Over and over. Why didn't you come?" Her hands fluttered toward her chest, the same gesture she'd used as a child when caught sneaking cookies. "My phone broke yesterday morning. Slipped right into the sink." She gave a weak laugh. "Can you believe my luck?" I glanced past her shoulder and spotted a brand new phone box sitting on the counter, receipt taped neatly to the side. The timestamp was from this morning. If her phone had broken yesterday, why had she waited nearly 24 hours to replace it? My stomach turned. "So you knew I was in the hospital," I pressed, "and just decided not to come." No. She rushed to say, adjusting the curtains with unnecessary fuss. "The nurse called our landline. She said you were stable and resting, so I thought it was better to take care of practical things here rather than panic at the hospital. You know how I get when I'm stressed." Her excuses stacked one on top of the other, fragile and sloppy. I'd taught her better than that. For decades, I'd told her lies were only useful if they were built with precision. But Wendy didn't even bother to meet my eyes. "When you were little," I said quietly, "you wanted to call an ambulance every time I sneezed. But now when I nearly die, you stay home because of practical things. Which version am I supposed to believe?" Her cheeks flushed, and she looked away. "Dad, you can be a bit dramatic sometimes. You always make things sound worse than they are." There it was again, dramatic. The word Jasper had used in his post. The word they must have whispered to each other until it became their favorite tool. I let the silence stretch until she fidgeted. "Where's Jasper?" I asked finally. "Job interview downtown," she replied too quickly. "Big opportunity." My eyes drifted back to the new phone on the counter. Her story had holes big enough to drive a truck through, and she knew it. But what chilled me more was how easily she spoke them, as if I'd already been written off as too gullible to question her. I forced a smile I didn't feel. "I see. Well, I should let you get back to your day." Relief flashed across her face like lightning. She was glad to see me leave. As I walked to my car, I realized something important. Wendy believed she still held the upper hand. She thought her performance had fooled me, but the truth was, she had just shown me exactly how far she was willing to go. And that gave me the blueprint for how far I would need to go in return. The drive home was quiet, but my thoughts roared louder than the engine. Every word Wendy had spoken echoed in my head, hollow and brittle. The lies about her phone, the flimsy excuse about practical things, the smug way she slipped in the word dramatic, as if my very survival was nothing more than another scene in a play she didn't want to attend. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were shaking. Not from weakness this time, but from rage contained too long. I killed the engine and sat in the stillness, staring at my house, the place I had spent 30 years paying for. To me, it was the legacy of my labor. To Wendy and Jasper, it was a prize waiting to be collected. I stepped inside, half expecting to smell her perfume again, to see some new gap where another piece of my life had vanished. But everything was as I had left it, quiet, settled mine. For now. Sitting at my desk, I opened the drawer she had rifled through. Birth certificates, insurance policies, bank statements, all handled, all disturbed. I traced the papers with my fingers, fury rising with each detail. She hadn't just been curious. She had been preparing, evaluating, calculating how long she would need to wait before everything became hers. The thought made my stomach twist. My daughter was planning my estate as if I were already gone. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my father's old chair, staring at the mantel where Sarah's photo still smiled down at me. She would have known what to do. She always had. But she wasn't here, and the weight of this decision fell squarely on me. Around midnight I rose and pulled out a notepad. My hands steadied as the pen touched paper. If Wendy and Jasper thought they could script the end of my story, then I would rewrite it. Piece by piece, line by line. I listed assets, the house savings, retirement accounts, small investments. Then I listed debts, none, thanks to years of careful planning. For the first time I saw what they saw, not a father, but a ledger. And that ledger had a value they were already spending in their minds. But what if I changed the equation? An idea stirred, simple but powerful. I didn't need to confront them in anger. I didn't need shouting matches or messy accusations. If they wanted to treat me as though I were dead, then I could bury their expectations while still alive. All it would take was one decision. The corner of my mouth lifted into something I hadn't felt in days, a smile. Not a joyful smile, but one of clarity. For years I had been the provider, the fixer, the man who came running whenever Wendy cried emergency. Now I would become something else, entirely the man who took it all back. And this time, there would be no warning. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. For once, there was no hesitation, no second guessing. The betrayal was no longer a question. It was a fact carved into my heart, as surely as the scar from my surgery. And I knew exactly what needed to be done. I pulled out my old address book, its pages smudged and yellowing. There it was, Silas Burton, real estate agent, neighbor, and friend for more than a decade. He'd tried for years to convince me to sell the house, calling it a gold mine in waiting. I had always laughed him off. This house was more than wood and nails. It was where Sarah baked bread on Sunday afternoons, where Wendy had learned to ride her first bike in the driveway. But now those memories felt tainted, almost weaponized. Wendy saw this place not as home, but as collateral. I dialed his number. The phone barely rang before Silas answered, his voice crisp and cheerful. Burton residence. Silas, it's Hiram Little. Hiram, good to hear your voice. I heard you had a health scare. How are you holding up? I'm recovering, I said, steadying my breath. But I've been thinking. You've been after me for years to sell this house. How quickly could you make that happen if I were serious? There was a pause, then the sound of him shifting into professional gear. In this market, I could have 3 offers on the table by Tuesday. Families are desperate to get into your neighborhood. If you want a cash sale, I know investors who could close within the week. I closed my eyes, picturing Wendy's face when she discovered the house, her inheritance, her fallback plan, had slipped through her fingers. A week, I repeated. That's exactly what I need. Hiram, are you sure about this? You always told me you'd never sell. I was a different man then, I said. Life changes things. Silas lowered his voice. Is this about Wendy? I didn't answer directly, but my silence said enough. Then let me handle this for you, he said firmly. I'll come by this afternoon. We'll take photos, draw up paperwork, and set a price that'll move fast. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen staring at the familiar walls. For years, I'd believed I was preserving this house for Wendy, for her children someday. But children weren't supposed to rob their parents while they were unconscious. Children weren't supposed to toast to their father's absence with cocktail glasses. This house had become a shackle tying me to a fantasy of family that no longer existed. Selling it wasn't a loss, it was freedom. By the time Silas pulled into the driveway that afternoon, briefcase in hand, my mind was made up. I would no longer be the man who gave without question. I would be the man who acted with precision. The game had changed, and this time, I was the one writing the rules. By Saturday afternoon, the paperwork was signed, and the house was officially on the market. Silas worked with the energy of a man who smelled opportunity, and I didn't stop him. Every photo he snapped, every document he slid across the table was another nail in the coffin of Wendy's expectations. This place will move fast, he said, straightening the stack of forms. Families dream of neighborhoods like yours. Quiet streets, good schools, mature trees, it's gold. I nodded, staring at the walls that once echoed with laughter. Let's make it quick, Silas. The sooner it's gone, the better. True to his word, by Tuesday morning the first showing had already happened. A young couple with a toddler toured the house, marveling at the hardwood floors and Sarah's carefully tended backyard. By Thursday, there were 3 competing offers. On Friday, I signed the contract. Just like that, the house Wendy thought was hers was sold to strangers who would fill it with the kind of love she had long forgotten. I sat across from Silas at the closing table, my signature drying on the final page. When the cashier's check slid across the polished wood surface, I didn't hesitate. I picked it up with steady hands. $435,000. Freedom distilled into numbers on a page. Silas smiled at me. You sure about this, old friend? Once this is done, there's no going back. I've never been more certain, I said. And I meant it. That evening, I returned one last time to the house. The keys jingled in my pocket as I walked through the empty rooms. Every corner carried ghosts. Sarah in the kitchen with flour on her hands. Wendy as a little girl curled on the couch with her favorite book. But those memories had already been stolen, poisoned by greed and indifference. I left the keys on the counter for the new owners, then stepped outside and pulled the door shut. The lock clicked softly, final and absolute. For the first time in years, I felt light. As I stood on the sidewalk, my phone buzzed. Wendy's name lit up the screen. I let it ring until it went silent. Another buzz, another call. Then a text, "Dad, we need to talk. Urgent." I almost laughed. Urgent for her, not for me. She had no idea yet. No idea that the house she counted on as her safety net was no longer in the family. No idea that her inheritance had evaporated in the space of a week. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked once more at the house. You wanted me gone, I whispered. Well, I'm gone, just not the way you planned. As I walked away, I realized something powerful. I hadn't just sold a house. I had sold their future, their entitlement, their control over me. And for the first time since my heart had failed, I felt truly alive. The morning after the sale, I was sipping coffee in my kitchen when a knock rattled the front door. My neighbor Jacqueline stood there, her expression brimming with the kind of eager concern only she could muster. Hiram, she said, thank goodness you're all right. I heard about your heart attack. I invited her in, though my instincts told me this wasn't just a social call. Jacqueline had always been the unofficial news service of the neighborhood. If she was here, she wasn't just checking on me, she was delivering information. She sat at the table, folding her hands dramatically. I saw Wendy and Jasper yesterday morning while I was getting the mail. They were talking about your heart, about how it's only a matter of time. Hiram, they're already discussing what they'll do with your house when you're gone. Her words hit me harder than the cardiologist's diagnosis. What exactly did they say? I asked, my voice low. She hesitated as if deciding whether to soften the blow. Then she leaned closer. They were walking through the neighborhood, pointing at houses, talking about property values, square footage, and how they'd renovate once yours was theirs. Jasper even called it a matter of when, not if. The mug in my hand trembled. Yesterday morning. That was the same time I was lying in a hospital bed, tethered to machines, fighting to stay alive. While I struggled for breath, my daughter and her husband were strolling past manicured lawns, measuring my future in resale value. Are you sure you heard right? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jacqueline touched my arm gently. I wish I hadn't. But Hiram, they weren't whispering. They weren't grieving. They were planning, and not years down the road soon. The room tilted slightly, and I steadied myself against the chair. The betrayal had already cut deep, but hearing it confirmed from another mouth, spoken so casually by my own flesh and blood, made it undeniable. I thanked Jacqueline, assuring her I was fine, though we both knew I wasn't. As she left, she called back. If you need anything, groceries, rides, you just ask. Some people know how to value their neighbors, even if family doesn't. Her words lingered long after the door closed. For decades, I had believed blood was thicker than water, that no matter how strained things became, Wendy would always choose me in the end. But Jacqueline's report told me otherwise. Wendy had already chosen her husband's greed, chosen convenience over loyalty, chosen inheritance over love. That night I sat in the quiet house and let the truth settle like dust after a storm. My daughter wasn't waiting for me to recover. She was waiting for me to die. And if I didn't act, she'd win by default. But I wasn't dead yet, and the house she thought was hers had already slipped away. She just didn't know it. The next day I drove past Wendy's neighborhood, my hands gripping the wheel tighter than usual. I didn't plan to stop. I only wanted to see for myself what Jacqueline had described. And there they were, Wendy and Jasper, strolling casually along Oak Avenue. From the safety of my car, I watched as they gestured toward houses, laughing and pointing like prospective buyers. They stopped in front of a 2-story colonial Jasper, pulling out his phone to jot down notes. Wendy tilted her head toward another house with a sprawling yard, and I could almost hear the conversation, how much space, what renovations, what it would sell for, after a quick flip. My chest tightened, not from illness this time, but from clarity. Jacqueline had been right. They weren't grieving, they weren't worried about me. They were taking inventory, preparing for the day when my heart gave out, and their payday arrived. I drove past, slowly lowering my window just enough to catch a snippet of their voices. Jasper's words floated through the air, sharp and casual. It's just a matter of timing when. Once the old man's house opens up, we'll have the capital we need. The old man. Not Dad. Not even Hiram. Just the old man. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. I pressed the accelerator and turned the corner before they could notice me. My pulse pounded in my ears, each beat a reminder that they were counting on my body to fail. But as I rounded the next block, another thought slipped in. What if I used that assumption against them? That evening, I sat in my living room, staring at the evidence I'd collected, the photos of stolen items, Jasper's mocking post, Jacqueline's testimony. Piece by piece, it formed a mosaic of betrayal. But more importantly, it gave me leverage. They thought they were orchestrating a future without me. But I was the one holding the blueprint now. I thought back to Sarah, to her warning on Wendy's wedding day. Be careful. Sometimes kindness looks like weakness. She had seen this coming, even if I had been too blinded by hope to believe it. For years I told myself I was giving Wendy stability. In truth, I was giving her entitlement. The clock on the mantel ticked louder than usual, each second daring me to take the next step. I knew confronting them directly would be useless. They'd deny, deflect, and turn the story back on me. No, if I wanted to win, I had to move in silence. I pulled out my phone and opened Silas's number again, my thumb hovering just above the call button. The house was already under contract, but I wanted reassurance. I wanted to hear his voice confirm that Wendy's inheritance had been erased, that their golden goose had flown the coop. As the line rang, I smiled for the first time in days. They thought they had me figured out. They thought the old man was one step from the grave. But what they didn't know was that the old man was about to outlive their plans. Silas answered on the second ring. Hiram, I was just about to call you. The closing is moving faster than I expected. You'll be free and clear before the weekend. Those words landed like a balm on my wounded pride. Free and clear. Not of the house I had loved that home once, but of the grip Wendy and Jasper thought they had over me. Good, I said evenly. That's exactly what I want. Buyers are eager, he continued. A young family with a little girl. They walked through and fell in love with the backyard. I think Sarah would have liked that. I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing Sarah kneeling in her garden, dirt on her hands. Laughter in her voice. Yes, she would have liked that. She would have liked that our house, instead of becoming a pawn in a greedy game, would become a place of joy for a child who still believed in innocence. When I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. The sale was inevitable, now irreversible. And while Wendy and Jasper were busy circling like vultures, measuring square footage and fantasizing about renovations, the ground was disappearing beneath them. Later that afternoon, Wendy called. Her number flashed across the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a message appeared, Dad, just checking in. Hope you're feeling better? Call me when you can. I laughed bitterly. The performance had begun. Tomorrow she would show up with flowers, maybe a basket of fruit she'd claim she picked out herself, and pretend to be the dutiful daughter. She'd lean close, squeeze my hand, and whisper about how much she cared. But I had seen behind the curtain now. I knew the truth. That night I sat at my desk and reviewed the evidence again, Jasper's post, the photos of missing items, Jacqueline's words about their when not if plans. I didn't need to confront them yet. They were already revealing themselves through carelessness, arrogance, and greed. I decided then that silence was my greatest weapon. The less I said, the more they'd assume I was still blind, still weak, still the drama king, too eager to forgive. They'd grow bolder, more reckless. And when the hammer finally dropped, they wouldn't even see it coming. I placed Sarah's photo on the desk, her smile a reminder of what mattered. You were right, I whispered. Kindness without limits becomes weakness, but I'm done being weak. The next morning, I saw Wendy's car in my driveway. Through the curtains, I watched her step out with a practiced look of concern plastered on her face, clutching a bouquet from the grocery store. I didn't open the door. Not yet. Instead, I stayed perfectly still, letting her knock and call my name. After 10 minutes, she gave up, walking back to her car, pulling out her shiny new phone as she went. I could almost hear her reporting to Jasper. "Don't worry, Dad's still buying it." She thought she was staging a performance. She didn't know she was walking straight into mine. By Thursday, the neighborhood was buzzing. Word traveled fast when a house went up for sale, especially one as well kept as mine. From my kitchen window, I could see couples slowing their cars as they passed, pointing at the for sale sign staked firmly in the yard. Each time I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Every stranger who stopped was another reminder that the future Wendy and Jasper had banked on was slipping further out of reach. That afternoon, Silas stopped by with documents for me to initial. "Multiple offers already," he said, tapping the papers. "But one stands out. Young family, good financing, ready to move quickly. If we push this, you could be closed before the week's end." "Do it," I said without hesitation. "The faster, the better." Silas studied me for a moment, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Hiram, you're handling this with steel. Most folks selling a lifelong home would be sentimental." "Sentiment doesn't pay when you're dealing with vultures," I muttered. He didn't press further. He didn't need to. That evening, my phone buzzed again, Wendy. This time I answered. Her voice was sugar-coated. "Dad, I stopped by yesterday, but you must have been resting. I brought flowers. Did you see them?" I glanced at the wilted bouquet she'd left on the porch. "I saw them." A pause. I feel terrible I couldn't be at the hospital." Jasper and I were overwhelmed. With cocktails, I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. The silence on the other end stretched long. "I don't know what you mean," she said, finally brittle. "Oh, I think you do." I let the words hang, savoring the crack in her voice. "Don't worry, Wendy. I'm fine now. Better than fine." She scrambled to regain footing. "That's wonderful, Dad. We'll come by this weekend to help you with the house. You shouldn't be doing heavy work after what happened." The irony nearly made me laugh. Help with the house, it wouldn't be mine by the time she set foot inside. "That won't be necessary," I said coolly. "Everything's already taken care of." When I hung up, I could almost picture her frown, the way her brow would furrow, as she dialed Jasper to dissect every word. They'd wonder what I meant if I suspected more than I let on. Let them wonder. Confusion was its own form of justice. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in weeks. For the first time, I wasn't lying awake imagining what else they might steal or how they might spin my illness to neighbors. Instead, I pictured a young girl running barefoot across my backyard, her laughter chasing away the ghosts that Wendy and Jasper had left behind. The sale wasn't just a transaction anymore. It was a declaration. My life and my legacy belonged to me, not to the parasites who thought my death was their payday. Friday arrived with an edge of anticipation, the kind I hadn't felt in years. Silas called at 9 a.m. sharp. "It's official, Hiram. The buyers signed this morning. All that's left is the key ceremony tomorrow. You'll walk away free and clear." I thanked him, though the real gratitude was reserved for the strange twist of fate that had opened my eyes. Had it not been for the heart attack, I might still be blind, still believing Wendy's crocodile tears meant love instead of leverage. The day passed in a haze of preparation. I boxed up papers, packed the few mementos I couldn't bear to part with, and left the rest behind. For years, I had thought this house would be Wendy's inheritance. Now it was a gift to strangers who deserved it far more than she ever would. By late afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Wendy. I answered this time just to hear the edge in her voice. Dad, I've been hearing rumors, she said. Jacqueline said she saw a for sale sign in your yard. That can't be true, right? It's true, I said evenly. The house is sold. Closing tomorrow. Her sharp inhale crackled through the line. You can't be serious. That house, it's our family home. Mom's memories are there. My childhood. How could you just throw that away? I almost laughed at the sudden appeal to nostalgia, the same woman who had ransacked my drawers and stolen my father's watch, daring to speak of sentiment. You seemed more interested in what the house was worth than what it meant, Wendy. Don't pretend otherwise. Her voice hardened. Jasper and I have been under incredible pressure. You don't understand how hard things are for us. No, I said. You don't understand. Hard is lying in a hospital bed, thinking your daughter might care enough to show up. Hard is discovering she was mixing cocktails instead. The silence that followed was thick, her excuses stalling before they could form. Finally, she whispered, You're being dramatic again, Dad. I smiled grimly. That word again, dramatic. They wielded it like a weapon, a way to dismiss and diminish me. But this time it was mine to use. Maybe I am, I said softly. But this drama has a closing act. I ended the call before she could respond. That evening, I walked through the house one last time. The air felt different, lighter somehow, as if the walls themselves were relieved to be freed from the weight of greed. In the living room, I paused beneath Sarah's photo. I did it, love, I whispered. They'll never touch this place. Tomorrow, I would hand the keys to a new family. And Wendy, well, she would learn that not every script ends the way the actors imagine. For once, I wasn't the drama king. I was the director. Saturday morning, the air felt sharper, clearer, as though the world itself knew something final was about to happen. I arrived at the house early, wanting a few quiet moments before it passed into new hands. Sunlight spilled across the lawn, where I had once taught Wendy how to ride her bike, her laughter echoing in my memory. Now the only sound was birdsong and the hum of a moving truck down the street. Silas pulled up a little before 9, the Stanley family right behind him. Waldo and Lori stepped out with their daughter Emma, who immediately ran to the yard, twirling in the grass, as though she already belonged there. Watching her filled me with a strange peace. This house deserved children's laughter again, not whispered schemes about resale value. We gathered on the porch, papers, signed hands, shaken keys exchanged. We'll take wonderful care of it, Lori said, clutching the keys with both hands as if they were made of gold. I know you will, I replied, and I meant it. The ceremony was simple, almost anticlimactic, yet to me it felt monumental. Decades of sacrifice, of building, of maintaining it all shifted in an instant. The house was no longer mine. But more importantly, it was no longer Wendy's future. As the Stanleys drove off to begin planning their move, I lingered on the sidewalk. That's when I saw her. Wendy's car screeched around the corner, tires protesting against asphalt. She pulled up fast, slammed the door, and stormed across the lawn, her face a mask of fury. "Dad!" she shouted. "What have you done?" I didn't flinch. "I sold the house. You sold our house." Her voice cracked with hysteria. Without telling me, without discussing it with family, I stood tall, letting the weight of decades settle into my voice. It was never your house, Wendy. My name was on the deed. I built this life, not you. And I chose who would inherit it, not through death, but through sale. Her eyes darted toward the for sale sign, now marked sold in bold red letters. She shook her head as if the sight itself were unthinkable. "You can't do this to us. We had plans. You were counting on my death," I said evenly. "But I'm still here. and your plans just evaporated. For the first time in years, I saw her falter. The practiced concern, the manipulation, the entitlement, all of it cracked, revealing fear beneath. Behind her, Waldo and Lori stood quietly by their car, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. Their daughter clutched a doll to her chest, sensing the tension, even if she didn't understand the words. "Step away from these good people, Wendy," I said firmly. "They have nothing to do with your greed." She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. And in that silence, I realized the power had shifted. I was no longer the old man waiting for permission to be valued. I was the man who had chosen his own freedom. Wendy's face drained of color, but her voice rose higher, shriller. "Dad, you can't just throw everything away like this. That house was supposed to be mine. It's where I grew up, where Mom—" She let her voice break, hoping Sarah's memory would soften me like it always had. But I'd heard enough. "Don't you dare use your mother's name to justify your greed. She warned me about you years ago, and I refused to listen. That's on me." But today, Wendy, the bill has come due. Her eyes flickered, calculations slipping through the cracks in her performance. "You don't understand, Jasper and I are under so much pressure. Debt bills, it's crushing us. You had the chance to help, and you chose to destroy us instead. You've mistaken help for servitude," I said. "And you've mistaken love for leverage." But those days are gone. Behind us, the Stanley family hovered awkwardly, unsure whether to leave or stay. I turned to them, softening my tone. "I'm sorry you had to witness this. You bought a home, not a spectacle. Please go inside and start your life here." Waldo nodded and gently guided his wife and daughter toward the door. Emma looked back, once confusion in her young eyes, before disappearing inside. I was glad she wouldn't hear what came next. Wendy stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You've ruined us, Dad. Do you realize what you've done? Without that house, we have nothing." I held her gaze steady as stone. "Then you'll finally know how it feels to build from nothing the way I did. The way your mother and I did. Maybe you'll learn the value of what you've been handed all these years." Her lip trembled, not from sorrow, but from rage. She spat the same word Jasper had once plastered online. "You're so dramatic. Always have been. Always will be." A bitter smile tugged at my mouth. "Dramatic, maybe. But I'm alive. And I'm free. You thought you could plan my funeral? Instead, I buried your inheritance." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Wendy's hands balled into fists, her entire body trembling. For the first time, she looked small, not because she lacked power, but because she realized the power she thought she owned had never been hers at all. "You'll regret this," she hissed, stepping back toward her car. "You'll regret it when you're old and alone." I straightened my shoulders. Better alone with peace than surrounded by parasites. She stopped, startled, as if the word had struck her harder than a slap. Without another word, she spun on her heel, slammed her car door, and sped off down the street, tires screeching. I stood there watching the dust settle. My chest still ached, but it wasn't from weakness. It was from something I hadn't felt in a long time: strength. For the first time since my heart had failed, I felt entirely, defiantly alive. The street was quiet again after Wendy's car roared off, but inside me the storm was only beginning to settle. I stood on the sidewalk a long time, breathing in the crisp morning air, letting the reality sink in. The house was gone. My ties to Wendy's schemes were severed, and for the first time in decades, I felt untethered. I walked slowly back to my car, pausing to glance one last time at the porch. How many Christmas mornings had we shared there? How many birthdays, dinners, late-night conversations. Now those memories belong to the past, sealed inside walls that no longer carried my name. And strangely, I was at peace with it. My phone buzzed just as I started the engine. Jasper this time. I let it ring out, but then his message popped up on the screen. "You've made a huge mistake, old man. You'll regret crossing us." I stared at the words until they blurred. Regret, no. The only regret I carried was waiting this long to take back control. Still, the threat revealed what I already knew: they weren't going to disappear quietly. They'd try to claw back whatever scraps they could, and I had to be ready. Back at my temporary apartment, I spread out the closing documents on the small kitchen table. Each page felt like a shield proof that their grasp on my life was broken. As I tucked the cashier's check into a folder, I realized something else: money wasn't the victory. Freedom was. The ability to live without their manipulation, without their endless emergencies, without their sneers behind my back. That night, as I sipped tea by the window overlooking the river, I thought about Sarah again. She had once accused me of mistaking generosity for duty. I used to argue with her, insisting that helping Wendy was what fathers did. But now I could almost hear her voice in the quiet: "You've finally learned." Better late than never. For the first time since she passed, I felt like I had honored her wisdom instead of defied it. The next morning, I took a walk along the riverbank. Children ran past with kites, their laughter bright and unburdened. Watching them, I felt something unfamiliar: hope. Not for Wendy, not for Jasper, but for myself. Life wasn't ending. It was beginning again, stripped of obligations I never should have carried. Still, a part of me knew this wasn't finished. Wendy wasn't the kind of person to let go. She'd come back, maybe with tears, maybe with threats. And Jasper's text proved he was already preparing for battle. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had survived a failing heart, survived betrayal so sharp it nearly killed me. Whatever came next, I would face it on my terms. As I turned back toward the apartment, the river glinting in the morning light, I felt the weight lift further. I was no longer their provider, their pawn, their drama king. I was simply a man, alive, free, defiant, and finally my own. 2 weeks passed before I heard from Wendy again. The silence was almost refreshing, though I knew it couldn't last. Sure enough, one evening my phone rang, and this time I answered. Her voice was soft, almost practiced. "Dad, can we meet? Just talk. Please." I agreed, but not out of hope for reconciliation. I wanted to look her in the eye one more time and see if she would finally show me the truth without disguises. We met at a small cafe downtown Neutral Ground. She arrived with Jasper at her side, both of them dressed as if for an interview, faces arranged into masks of concern. Wendy reached across the table, her eyes shimmering. "Dad, we're worried about you. Selling the house so suddenly, it's not like you. People are starting to wonder if you're making sound decisions." There it was, the angle I'd expected. Not remorse, not accountability, but an attempt to paint me as unstable. Sound decisions, I echoed. Like ignoring a hospital call, like celebrating my heart attack with cocktails. "That's sound enough for you." Jasper shifted uncomfortably, but pressed forward. "You're misunderstanding, Hiram. We were just trying to cope. Stress makes people do strange things, and you know how dramatic things can look online." I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "Don't call me dramatic." I saw the post. I saw the laughing emojis. While I was fighting for my life, you were toasting my absence. That's not coping, it's cruelty. Wendy's composure faltered for just a moment before she snapped back. "You can't hold one mistake over our heads forever. We're family. Family sticks together." I laughed, bitter and sharp. Family doesn't rob drawers while their father is unconscious. Family doesn't call the neighbors to gossip about his weak heart and his house's resale value. Family doesn't treat a man's death as a solution to their money problems. The color drained from her face. Jasper muttered, "We just thought, but I cut him off." "No, you didn't think. Or rather, you thought I'd never find out. But I did. And I acted. The house is gone. The inheritance you counted on is gone. And the leash you thought you had on me gone." The cafe had grown quieter around us, the nearby tables catching fragments of my words. Wendy glanced around, her cheeks flaming with embarrassment. For once, she had no clever comeback, no way to twist the narrative. I stood, placing a 20 on the table for my coffee. "You wanted to play the part of grieving children someday. You'll have to do it without the prize you were waiting for. I may have a weak heart, Wendy, but I've got a stronger backbone than you ever imagined." I walked out into the evening air, leaving them in stunned silence. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one defending myself. I was the one setting the terms. 3 months later, I sat in my new apartment overlooking the Ohio River. The place was modest compared to the house I'd left behind, but it was mine by choice, not by obligation. The mornings were quiet, the air fresher, the view wide and uncluttered. Some nights I still missed Sarah's garden or the creak of the old stairwell, but the peace I'd gained far outweighed the nostalgia. On the kitchen counter, a calendar reminded me of the date, June 15th, Wendy's 36th birthday. For 36 years, I had called her every morning on that day, sometimes to arrange dinner, sometimes just to say I loved her. This year, I debated letting the day pass in silence. But silence, I decided, wouldn't be strength. It would be avoidance. I needed to face her one last time on my terms. I dialed her number. She answered on the 4th ring, her tone clipped professional, almost as though I were a stranger. "Hello, Dad." "Happy birthday, Wendy," I said. The words felt both familiar and foreign. A pause. "Thank you. How are you managing?" "We're fine." "No thanks to you." Her bitterness cut like glass, but it no longer pierced me. "I'm glad to hear you're doing well," I replied evenly. "I won't keep you. I just wanted to say I hope this year brings you clarity." There was a long silence, as if she couldn't decide whether to lash out or plead. Finally, she asked, "Is that all?" I looked around my apartment, the books stacked neatly on shelves, the fishing gear leaning in the corner, the absence of clutter from crises that weren't mine to solve. Peace looked different than I expected, but it felt exactly right. "Just one more thing," I said. "Try not to be so dramatic, sweetheart." The line went dead before I finished exhaling. She'd hung up on me. I set the phone down and returned to my coffee, still warm steam curling lazily into the air. Outside, families strolled along the river path. Parents pushed strollers, children raced with kites, laughter carried across the water. I watched them with a quiet smile, realizing I wasn't mourning what I'd lost. I was grateful for what I had gained. Wendy and Jasper had gambled on my weakness. They believed my death would be their payday, my house their reward, my silence their shield. But I was still alive, and in staying alive, I had rewritten the ending. For once, I wasn't the drama king in someone else's story. I was the quiet king of my own, and that was enough. Looking back, I realized the heart attack wasn't the true wake-up call. It was the betrayal that followed. My daughter's absence, her husband's cruel post, the theft from my home, those weren't just painful moments. They were lessons. Lessons about the danger of mistaking generosity for love, about how silence can empower the wrong people, and about the importance of protecting what you've built. I used to believe that being a good father meant never saying no, never drawing boundaries. But in the end, The most important gift I gave myself wasn't money or possessions, it was freedom. Freedom from manipulation, freedom from being treated like a ledger instead of a man. By taking action, by rewriting the script, I showed Wendy that family doesn't mean entitlement. It means respect. And when respect is gone, you have every right to walk away. So if you're a parent out there sacrificing everything for children who only ask yourself this: are you helping them grow, or are you helping them exploit? Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to be used. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you loved and trusted? How did you handle it? And what did you learn? Share your thoughts in the comments, I'll be reading them. And if this story spoke to you, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for listening.